afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. Welcome back to Weather Center Nazario, and boy, we are definitely gearing up for an exciting weekend here in the Sunshine State with this approaching cyclone expected to form in the Gulf of Mexico. Before we get started, please like and share this video, like and share this information. If you could, please do me that favor and subscribe to the channel if you are brand new as we continue to roll out updates on this unfolding situation we have over the next 72 to 96 hours here, not only in Florida, but along the Gulf Coast and the rest of the eastern seaboard as this event gets underway. So right here, we are paused on our 12 Zulu European model, and I wanted to leave this shot static just so you guys can get an idea of exactly what it is that we're currently dealing with. There are going to likely be some subtropical characteristics with this system. I'm not going to pull it up for the sake of time on this video, but I've been looking at the sea surface temps for the Gulf of Mexico, and the only reason I bring those up, I've seen other sources mentioning the potential for a fully named subtropical storm. I don't think we're going to quite hit that threshold. However, I do think towards the center of circulation of this system, which is why the European model has once again deepened its expectations of how low the central pressure could get. I do think because of this small channel right in through here, the south central Gulf of Mexico, we still have temperatures between the 26 and 27 degree Charlie threshold, which is more than enough to get some tropical-like thunderstorm activity forming within this vortex. Now, we've seen a lot of wobble back and forth, a windshield wiper, if you will, with the European model specifically. Initially, we saw different indications that the system could pass down towards the south and scrape through the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula, impacting somewhere between the Keys and right around the Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers area where Hurricane Ian barreled through last year in September 2022. Ever since then, we've definitely been seeing different indications that the model wants to take it towards the Tampa-St. Pete area, and yesterday at 12 Zulu, we actually had a model run of the Euro that brought it right around into the same general direction as the GFS was predicting. Now, the GFS, and I'll show you that here in a minute, is expecting this system to pivot a little bit more shorter notice before coming across the Florida Peninsula and kind of impacting the same general spot that we saw Hurricane Idalia make landfall back in August. Overall, though, regardless, guys, we have a strengthening cyclone on our hands that's expected to undergo cyclogenesis to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula, riding the subtropical jet in as its steering flow, if you will, through the peninsula of Florida up into Georgia, South Carolina, and the rest of the mid-Atlantic region for that matter. Some model indications think it could also stall out, helping to create even more torrential rainfall accumulation, some localized heavy rain, and flooding for that matter as well, before deepening into a possible nor'easter and ejecting up through the northeast or out to sea as our next trough along the United States comes through and picks it up and steers it out. Here's our 12Z GFS, and right out of the gate, once again, we have a static image here, and if I continue through the loop ever so slightly, you can see that we are expecting a Big Bend impact. I'm not really going to use the term landfall. Is this technically a landfalling system? Absolutely, but I don't want to confuse anyone out there. We're not talking a tropical entity, but we are still talking a powerful one for that matter. You can see that the GFS is expecting a central pressure now of 988 millibars as this system moves ashore. So as I mentioned when we were looking at the European model, you can see the GFS has a bit more of a northerly bias to it, whereas the European model has been somewhere in this general region of the state of Florida where we could see this system roll ashore, and that honestly means the world to us Floridians, because depending on if it takes a more northward track or a more southern track could change the entire name of the game of what kind of phenomena we experience with this over the next few days. I also don't want to forget our folks in the Bahamas and Cuba, the Cayman Islands, and eventually Jamaica as well, because as this system continues to deepen, look at how expansive and shrimp-like it begins to take on as an appearance as you continue to move it through the southeast United States. I'll go a couple more panels in advance, and you can see already by the time we get into 0Z Monday, this would be Sunday night around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can see that not only are we already experiencing very heavy rainfall through the mid-Atlantic region altogether, moving into the Midwest and the Great Lakes, I wouldn't be surprised, even though we can't see it on this AOI, if we weren't already seeing some serious rainfall action and an increase in wind speeds in the Northeast for that matter as well. But look at how this appendage of very heavy rainfall extends through the Bahama Islands, through Cuba, into the Cayman Islands, and down through Jamaica, where we continue to see an influx of moisture and a cold frontal boundary, a cold frontal tail, if you will, begin to push down to the southeast. That's because as we have this subtropical system, is what I'm going to call it, it's a very dynamic entity. It's like a hybrid low, if you will, developing in the Gulf of Mexico right into this general area. As I showed you guys a few videos ago and in our few last couple of live streams we've had on the channel, we also have the polar front jet and some fresh polar air, making its way through the central and southern plains and off the Gulf Coast. That's also going to interact and help to pick up frontal activity or frontogenesis. You've heard the term cyclogenesis, which would be the formation of a cyclone. Frontogenesis, as the name implies, would be frontal genesis or cold front formation. So in this case, as that continues to interact with one another, not only do we have a very substantial warm conveyor belt out on the leading edge of this system that could help induce some severe activity, but we also have that punch of cold air that's going to get wrapped up in its center of circulation to only further destabilize the environment. And that's why we have this torrential line or this axis of frontal activity and rainfall that's expected to push well off the southeastern coastline. You could definitely see a lot of it in the Bahamas. I know a few of you guys out there are cruising through the Bahamas and expected to come back to Port Canaveral around the Sunday time frame. As you can see, we're definitely going to have some hellacious weather out there, rough seas. You definitely will expect some chop as you go through the next couple of days and get into the beginning of next week. I also know a buddy of mine who's going to be flying back into the Tampa area on Sunday as well. We could see some really good turbulent mixing, or some good turbulence, I should say, and some icing associated with this system as well that may cause some delays. So we'll keep a close eye out for you guys, but you can definitely see that this is going to be a very expansive storm system, and a heck of a lot of people are definitely going to feel the impacts. All right, with the adjustments that we've seen in the euro from 0Z to 12Z, once again, the European model, it's been doing a lot of ebbing and flowing. It'll go south and weak, and then it'll go north and strong, south and weak, and so on. And with that windshield wiper effect, we've been seeing all of our thunderstorm and severe weather parameters going back and forth with it. With this latest 12Z iteration, if I rapidly go through this loop, you can see our surface buoyancy is definitely back up there across much of the South and Central Florida Peninsula, with some values in the Tampa-St. Pete area getting up to 1250 and almost 1500 joules per kilogram. So the threat of severe weather, just looking at our instability in the low levels or close to ground level, is definitely there for some very strong thunderstorm activity and some possible water spouts for the Tampa Bay area. This is where it gets really interesting. So if you remember a couple videos back, I'd mentioned the difference between CAPE and ML CAPE, or mixing layer or mixed layer CAPE or mean layer CAPE, however you want to use it. It's another form of CAPE, and essentially what it does is it takes that low level or surface-based bias, as you would see with an SB CAPE parameter, and imagines, or if you will, it kind of gives it more of an unbiased perspective and texture to it. It'll take these air parcels that would condense into thunderstorms eventually through their life cycle and as they lift in the atmosphere, and make it to the point where we have enough surface heating, we have enough mixing in the environment to where these parcels are kind of scattered about above ground level. They've been lifted to a certain point in the air, and they're either condensing or not condensing and forming updrafts. And in this case, ML CAPE is going to be a little bit more accurate, and as you can see, the entire Florida area is beneath values between 800 joules per kilogram, with some off the west and southwest coastline, and even in the Florida Keys, a small pocket there approaching the 14 to 1600 joules per kilogram threshold, which is not good when you also take a look at the wind barbs here. We still have that low-level southerly component, mid-level southeasterly or southwesterly component, and then almost a due easterly component at 500 millibars, which is going to give us a little bit more rotation in some of those thunderstorms. Now here we're going to take a quick glance at what the Euro is thinking in terms of our gusts down at the surface level. We're not going to go to the mid-levels just yet. I just want to get you guys an idea of what exactly we're expecting to take shape, especially along our coastline. So right about here, when it's game time for most of the Florida Peninsula, with the wind field expanding all the way up into the Carolinas and Georgia at this point, you could see anywhere between 35 to 40 knots up through South Carolina, parts of interior and eastern Georgia, and then right along the west coast of Florida, where that center of circulation is likely to move inland. We're definitely going to have tropical storm style gusts moving inland across that general area. I can see a 41 knot threshold already met for the Tampa Bay area. So you guys are definitely going to have some very gusty winds as this system unfolds, and it is going to be an extensive event or a prolonged event. As you go through time, you could see as early as 18 Zulu on Saturday, which is only 2 p.m., a little after lunchtime on Saturday. The European model is thinking we could already be in that tropical storm threshold along the west coast, with some very good easterly winds helping to create rip currents, beach erosion, and high waves along the east coast from Jacksonville all the way through to the South Florida tip. Now, we're going to get into the juicy bits. I'm going to let you guys know right now I am fully prepared to go storm chasing this weekend, and I'd like to take you guys along for the ride, especially once we get some more high-vis model data in to pinpoint where we could possibly see some mesocyclones, supercellular, and some tornadic activity with this system as it barrels through. What we are looking at here is now our mid-level wind flow at 850 millibars on the left and our 700 millibar vertical velocities on the right. And I'm going to leave this static image right here because this essentially communicates the entire picture I want to explain to you guys. Very, very good southerly fetch of mid-level wind with a sudden acceleration out of the east across central and northern Florida. That's a problem because that's going to help get these storms rotating and help to increase the amount of shear that the isolated or embedded convective cells that we have in this swath of rainfall get in order to keep that tilt and keep them longer lasting or self-sustaining as they move across the peninsula. If you look at the 700 millibar threshold as well, the vertical velocities, you can see that there is a tight clustering of extreme vertical velocities or lift supported by not only this cyclone itself, but the shortwave activity at 500 and 300 millibar jet support that we have over top of this system with the polar front jet and the subtropical jet interacting right over the southeast quadrant of the U.S. So I do think we have a very, very pungent chance at seeing some strong storms with this, and I do think SPC is more than likely going to highlight that threat for some severe weather and tornadic activity as we go over the next 24 hours. At least I hope they do. Right now, Florida is only identified as a threat for heavy rain and flooding. I hope that they start to push out the possibility or at least increase their expectations in terms of their forecast for severe weather, because looking at all these different dynamics, and this is a very broad-brushed perspective I'm giving to you guys in this video, I already have enough ingredients to bring my case to the table and argue that we could see a little bit of everything. Very strong non-convective and convective winds, isolated tornadoes and waterspouts along the coastline. We could see some pockets of hail that we've seen with previous severe weather events in Dixie Alley and the Appalachians Midwest like we saw a few days ago. So this is going to be a garden variety severe weather setup with some subtropical characteristics peppered in there because this is going to be a system coming off of our warmer than average Gulf of Mexico. I'm going to take you very quickly through our total precipitation accumulation chart according to the Euro, and you can see I'm going to leave it right about here, guys, because the general takeaway from here is as we get a little bit of that frontal overrunning that's already occurring for the south and southeast peninsula, we are going to see greater rain rates and more accumulation down towards the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Florida Keys region. But the general agreement or the general thinking is for much of the state up into Georgia and the Carolinas is you're, regardless of where you live, going to likely see 2 to 3 inches of rain with this system. If we can keep most of the drought-afflicted areas within that threshold, that's good news. If we see some isolated areas like the southeastern portion of Florida and these embedded pockets of heavier rain where we could see 6 to 7 inches in some localized spots, that's when the possibility of localized flooding becomes more of an issue. But as of right now, with the 2 to 3 inches of rain, will we see some collecting on lower lying areas on some roadways, and it might make driving a little bit difficult, if not extremely difficult with the way Florida drivers are? You bet. But right now, we're not looking at a catastrophic flood event for the entire state outside of the south and southeastern quadrant of the Florida Peninsula specifically. And then last but not least, I saw this yesterday and it has been echoed into this morning. I thought this was very interesting. If you guys remember during my segments regarding the tropical season, I used to pull up our probabilities quite a bit, and I've started to notice that our European ensemble tropical depression probabilities are actually going up with this system to come up to as far as the 30 percentile that we could see tropical depression formation. Now guys, I'm going to let you know, I'm going to give you this disclaimer. I don't think this is going to be a tropical depression. There's no way it has a chance of going full tropical just because of all the different environmental factors playing with this system's cyclogenesis. But I do find it very interesting that the Euro is pinging on tropical depression characteristics in the form of 20 knots or greater, which means we are going to have a pretty spectacular wind event for not only Florida, but the Panhandle and the rest of the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic as the system unfolds. Alrighty guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I thank you very much for taking some time out of your Wednesday afternoon to enjoy this video segment alongside me, and I hope to see you tonight at our 8 p.m. live discussion, because we're definitely going to dig into the nitty-gritty and cover a lot of the more finite parameters that we did not get to in this video tonight in our live forecast and analysis discussion. That's what I'm going to be calling it, because we're going to be very heavily scrutinizing this under a microscope, if you will, to kind of determine and slowly begin to nail down what this kind of phenomena could look like in your general local area. Right now, we're still a little far away, so I'm not digging into the details as of yet, but as we go through late in the day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and especially early Saturday morning, we're going to have a lot more visibility in terms of what the localized impacts could look like county by county, region by region. And you best believe if Weather Center is out there in the Weather Center mobile, you guys are coming along for the live chase, and I'm very excited to finally bring that kind of coverage to you guys and get out there in the front lines and hopefully get some very good weather content to bring to the table that's fresh and new for this YouTube channel. But again, guys, tune in tonight at 8 p.m. for our live forecast and analysis. I hope to see you there. It's always a great time, good collaboration and good conversation amongst very like-minded individuals. And yeah, have a good rest of your Wednesday. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.